Hey guys, Loman02, another day, another dollar. We're back for some Canadian Highlander here. So this is Mardu. I've been putting this deck off a long time because Mardu and Esper mid-range style decks tend to be the bane of my existence. They're very interesting and I think difficult to build, and kind of in a lot of ways lack like a coherent identity as not a subsidiary or worse variety of deck that other color pies kind of do. So like when I look at Mardu, I tend to look at it as kind of like a build of Grixis that has a lot less flexibility in what it does. So when you step away from green and blue for mid-range, so like normally you'll hear of like mid-range decks, at least in my opinion, being classified as like UX or GX mid-range. When someone says like GX mid-range, it tends to be a deck that has mana dorks in it, or green is the primary color that kind of like dominates the color pie in that deck. When they say blue X, generally they tend to be cantrip-driven decks, lower curve, mid-range to control variety, and you use cantrips to kind of control your mana and kind of the relevance of the cards that you put into your hand, through cards like Brainstorm, Preordain, Ponder, etc. So I've kind of struggled with this build over a long time frame. I've made it more aggressive, tried to build like an aggro control shell. I wasn't happy with that because it just didn't have the flexibility I needed, and the threats just weren't good enough. And it just basically turned into like kind of a bad aggro deck, kind of a bad version of like 4-color blood aggro without the good green cards that actually make that deck really work. So what I ended up doing is kind of making more of a mid-range control deck out of it. It's what you have in front of you. It's a very value-oriented deck. The closest analogous deck that I could say this deck kind of runs similarly to is Grixis mid-range, although this deck is more focused on the board and the hand zone. So there are a lot of slots dedicated towards impacting the board in some way, shape, or form. It still has a fairly decent low-end threat density, and then it has a lot of planeswalkers. A ton of planeswalkers because this deck does not have a ton of like pure card draw. It has some, but planeswalkers tend to have these incremental effects that kind of add up to be like the value of a card. But the deck is very slow, very grindy, kind of like an old school style like mid-range or like board control deck. I'd say it's almost board control. But it's very value-oriented. So anyways, that is kind of the theory behind my build of Mardu. I've called it Mardu Pyromancer, but it plays probably more like just Mardu mid-range. It does have the Pyromancers in it, with the exception it doesn't actually have the new Pyromancer, whatever that one's called. I tried it for a bit, it just didn't work out. Double red at 3 was kind of tough, and it was kind of a low-impact card. So anyways, this is the deck you got. So a lot of value. 35 land deck. It is running some basics, but the mana in Mardu tends to be a little bit of a struggle as well, because you don't have that green to kind of help, smooth out your mana. You don't have the blue to kind of cantrip into the right land drops, find the right lands you need, or get rid of trash from your hand with like fetch lands. So the lands tend to be, you tend to have to overfix with these decks. There's a lot of double requirements along the curve. You have cards like Murderous Rider and Hymn to Turek, then you have like Chandra at 4. You have Gideon. So yeah, it tends to be a little bit of a struggle. So you'll see in this style of build, I am running like the all of the filter lands for this deck. I'm running 2 of the pain lands. I believe I'm not running the red-white pain land, but I'm running the other 2 pain lands, Caves of Koilos and Sulphur Springs. So yeah, that's kind of how it goes. The mana just needs to be very fluid. You could even run like City of Brass and Mana Confluence in this deck and probably be fine with it, because this deck gains a ton of life. One of the things that I will say like Mardu kind of has an advantage in this format is that it's very good against board-based decks. I think it's a very good option if you think there's going to be a lot of like Death and Taxes, White Weenie, or like Red Deck wins in your metagame. I think the deck is very good at that because a lot of its cards, tend to be 2-for-1s. They tend to be kind of low to the ground. They tend to be, like Arc Trails, Forked Bolts, Matthias, Fiend Hunter, Plague Engineer, Young Pyromancer, Dreadhorde Arcanist. You have like Seeker of the Way, and then Soulfire Grandmaster. Just a ton of these little cards that like have 2-for-1 advantage, gain a little bit of incremental life, trade off pretty effectively with like the more aggressive decks. And then you just tend to like try to haymaker them with like planeswalkers. You have like Murderous Rider, which is again another 2-for-1 that comes back and gains you life on the backswing. Duretti, which really isn't optimized in this deck, but I'm just trying this card out because I haven't played a lot with it, and frankly, it's pretty good at what this deck's trying to be good at, which is basically just beat up on board-based decks. And it's also kind of a nice incremental card against like the Academy decks if they don't like just roll you over in the first 3 turns, and you can get this thing down and start killing off their artifacts. Tends to be pretty good as well. Yeah, so just a lot of 2-for-1 advantage, a lot of just really grindy cards, not intended to win the game fast, intended to kind of just remove your opponent's options. So what are the risks that you inherently take when you go with a game plan like that? Well, when you're a value-oriented deck like this, you tend to lose a significant amount of game against the proactive non-board-based decks. So like Storm, Academy can also be another problematic matchup. Basically, anything that doesn't need to cast a ton of creatures and permanents to really win the game. We have a ton of discard in the deck too. Mind Twist, this is a 3 Mox and Mind Twist deck, and then just as much discard as we can have. Gerard's Verdict is very techy. It's not a card that a lot of folks think is great. Pull it up real fast, but once this thing comes up, ooh, big. There's Arc Trail. That's an Arc Trail. Doesn't see a lot of play anymore, but it's fine in this deck. Gerard's Verdict. It's a him to Turek, but they get to choose what cards they are. And you gain 3 life for each land discarded this way. So, against aggro, if they want to get rid of their lands because they want to keep gas in hand, you gain some incremental life against them, which is kind of nice as well. But ton of discard in the deck. So that is kind of the theory behind Mardu. Just tons of 2-for-1s. Try to trade up as much on mana. And, have cards like Smiting Helix that basically, are 2 cards stapled to 1. Or like Savine's Reclamation, which, if you've seen my last couple of videos, I'm a pretty big fan of this card, and I'm just trying to test it out in a lot of different shells. And I kind of wondered if, maybe it would help this deck out, because it's a deck that I've worked on and off again. I probably have, 6 or 7 different builds of it. And I don't think this one's even per se complete, but I think it's going in the right direction. And I think it's good. I think this deck's good. I think it's, when I say good, I mean, it's tier 2. I wouldn't call it a tier 1 deck. It could win events. But, it would have to be, it's fairly meta-specific. It wants a metagame that doesn't have a ton of combination-style decks in it, because it doesn't kill very fast. It can disrupt very well, but it cannot kill very fast. So, I think it's not well-suited for those style of matchups in general. This is the deck, tons of 2-for-1s. Alright, so mana, I'm not going to really talk it exhaustively. Don't have a ton of utility lands in this deck because the mana is so important to the deck itself. As far as utility lands, the ones that I do have in the deck, I have Sunbaked Canyon and Silent Clearing, the basically canopy lands for the deck. Karakas, just to bounce Legends, card's very good. And then just Wasteland, no other utility lands in the deck. It is running, I believe, a basic of each variety. They could possibly be snow lands, just one of each. And then all the Mox that are on color. So Mox Jet, Mox Pearl, Mox Ruby, Mox Diamond, and then Chrome Mox. Those are pretty essential to a strategy like this because, like I said, this deck assumes some decent-sized risk in the unfair matchups. So you want to have outs to drawing just faster hands that can get down Planeswalkers really early and start pressuring your opponent. Whether it's a pressure in their yard with Kaya, Orzhov Enforcer, whatever that 3-mana Kaya is, or getting down a Liliana the Veil and starting to chip away at Storm's hand or something like that. But yeah, you definitely want to have fast masters. I'm also running Tithe in this deck. I don't know if it's necessary. This deck does not have a ton of filtration in it. You have stuff along the lines of Smuggler's Copter, Faithless Looting, Tainted Pact. I'm even running a Sensei's Dividing Top because I think it kind of does help smooth the deck out a bit without having access to blue cantrips. But I'm running Tithe just to have a shuffle effect in there, mostly for the Sensei's Dividing Top, and then also if I miss lands or if I get behind on lands, it's very nice to have that. It's just a way to get back up on cards. And then because I'm running Faithless Looting and some card some rummaging effects, some cards that actively aren't really card advantage, they're just card filtration. Tithe can get you back up on mana or give you access to more cards in hand, so you can kind of get rid of them with your effects like Faithless Looting or Liliana the Veil, etc. Anyway, that's kind of the mana base, kind of how it's set up. 35 land. The mana's worked pretty well so far in the deck. I haven't had a ton of troubles with the mana in the games that we're going to be showcasing. Next we have the Savine's Reclamation package, so I want to try this card out. I've actually used it quite a bit in the deck. I've played probably about 10 games with it. I think I'm 9 out of 10, 9 and 1 with the deck right now. I think I'll be showing 5 to 6 games this evening. Savine's Reclamation tends to find either a 3-mana Planeswalker or get back a 3-mana Planeswalker and/or Wasteland and/or draw land. It tends to be the most common things. Typically, on the front hat, there's been a couple games where I've just found Wasteland, got Wasteland back, and then flashed it back to get Wasteland again, and Wastelanded someone 3 times and just won the game that way. Basically turned it into Life from the Loam. Or a miniature Crucible of Worlds for a little bit of time, and 3 Wastelands in one game tends to be enough if they haven't played to the board. That's kind of how that game ended up going. But also just getting back a couple Planeswalkers really good. Another card you could be interested in trying out in this deck is Gamble. Gamble does not have a ton of equity in this deck, But I'm very high on Savine's Reclamation. I think with the high volume of 3-mana Planeswalkers, which I've tried to run as many as I can in here, probably with the exception of like Gideon the Trials, I'm not running that one. It's pretty easy to get value off this card, and at a minimum, I like having Entomb just to get this thing in the bin. I think Gamble could also be a pretty strong consideration to gamble to put something relevant in the bin for Savine's Reclamation. But this is the kind of card that I think Mardu really wants. Just being a grindy mid-range variant of Mardu, I think this card is very good. And yeah, the deck does not have a very high curve. Most of my decks do not. I tend to like to have like low curve, efficient, mid-range decks. I think the format's fast enough that like you need to be able to pivot relatively quickly, while still kind of having the traditional like value-oriented gameplay that a lot of these decks are going to have. All right. Next up, we have the threats. So this is a mid-range deck, so a lot of this is not going to seem all that creative. There's not a lot of techiness to it. It's just standard kind of good stuff cards. Like Gideon Ally of Zendikar, in my opinion, at 4 mana, honestly, like probably one of the best, like just get them dead planeswalkers. This deck card can be played in like Death and Taxes, like White Weenie. Can be played in Blue-White Control. I think it's fine there. And it's good in mid-range decks like this. Just so much power for so little mana. Split across 2 bodies. Can be an Anthem if you need it. This is a more token-oriented build. It doesn't run a ton of tokens. It runs quite a few. But it runs enough that like the tokens can be relevant with the Anthem effect. But typically speaking, you're just making 2/2s with this thing, or you're making a token and then turning it into a 5/5 and attacking for 7 and killing your opponent really fast. Chandra TOD here, cool stained glass art. This card is just a card advantage engine. It's a Janebei Tome that kills people. It can also make mana. It's also a Flame Tongue Kavu. I don't know what else you could ask for. This card does everything mid-range could possibly want, so it's pretty much an auto-include in the deck. Palace Jailer, yeah, this card, same story, just a beating of a card, just another beating. Card advantage engine again, also impacts the board, and can attack, very, very good. Queen Marchesa. So this card's interesting in this deck. This is not the most aggressive build of this deck, but I think this card is just powerful enough on its own that it's worth running. This deck has a ton of creature kill in it. Like, it's very good at dealing with board impacting cards. So I often find that I'm going to generally not be behind on creatures. Generally, the boards will tend to stay open. If the board's not open, it means I probably have a bad hand, or I've kept a bad hand against the deck I'm playing against. And just landing this thing on 4 with an open board, it tends to spell game over. I mean, you're just getting 2 extra cards, or an extra card every turn, plus, even if you do lose the Monarchy, I mean, you're getting benefits off this thing with 1/1 hasty assassins that have Death Touch and trade for other cards on the board. Just very, very good. It's a small body, but, it's hasty. It has Death Touch, so it kills anything it gets tangles with, generally, unless it has First Strike. Card's just quite good. Alright, Monastery Mentor is the next up. As you'll see, we only have 17 creatures in here, so there's a ton of things that trigger this card. Whether it's Entomb and Savine's Reclamation, or the litany of Planeswalkers and removal spells, or Sensei's Divining Top. A lot of ways to get Monastery Mentor going. It makes a lot of tokens. There's some consideration for this build as to whether or not, we may want to cut Mind Twist and add in, like, Skull Clamp. If I had more points to play with, I would probably explore, like, Umezawa's Shit and a sword and a Stoneforge Mystic. But Stoneforge Mystic plus a Shit is another 3 points, so that would put me at 13 points if I were to play them. You could do some reconfiguration if, like, you don't have access to the Moxen and you wanted to build this deck. If you're trying to build it in paper, Moxen are obviously expensive. I would say you probably want to cut the Ruby or the Pearl. The Jet is the least replaceable. This is mostly, it has the highest volume of black cards in it. You can cut, like, the Pearl or Ruby and put in Jit and Stoneforge Mystic, and I would not think you're crazy. I think those cards both be very good in the deck. So yeah, I mean, like, there's a couple other options you can go with, like the threat package, Vice Mana. I tend to like the fast mana though. I think it's better. All right, I'm trying this card out, Chandra Acolyte of Flame. So a couple of things you get in blue, or like in green, is like Snapcaster Mages, regrowth effects, ways to rebuy your spells and kind of get value out of the bin. This card does that for a non-blue deck, which is kind of cool. It's also a means of threatening your opponent. It does a tiny little bit of damage, but really it's more about, like, getting some incremental damage in, and then also being able to flashback your high impact spells. Whether that's discard, whether that's board sweeps, whether that's direct damage spells, Zealous Persecutions to knock out a follow-on, True Name Nemesis. You name it. Like, this card can get back, a lot of our spells that, we require second running of. So I think this card's just fine. It doesn't really protect itself that well, but the games of this deck are going to tend to go long. It's a more mana-rich deck, and, dropping this late tends to be nice because you can just drop it late and then, get something back. And again, I kind of want to run more of these 3-mana Planeswalkers because I kind of want to build equity in my Savine's Reclamation and my Entomb package. And, yeah, I'm kind of trying this card out. I'm not sure if I'm sold on it yet, but I do think it's also quite good. I don't think it's a bad card. And I think if there's a deck that wants it, that's not already like a blue deck, it's probably a deck like this where you don't have access to blue and you want this style of effect to be able to get your spells back. Alright, Liliana the Last Hope. Yeah, this card's just great. Buys back your creatures, whether they be Palace Jailers and Marchesas to steal the Monarchy back, or Monastery Swiftspear, or Mentors rather, and or some of our hate pieces like Camball, Plague Engineer, like Matthias, like Aven Mindsensor. Card is just very, very good. It's a great walker. Buys back creatures, kills little creatures, and eventually becomes an insurmountable threat. So, yeah. Aven Mindsensor. Yeah, I just think if you're playing white, you want to play this card. This card's just so good, especially in fair white decks. This is kind of one of those cards that just says, hey, fuck off combo. A lot of the decks, every deck in this format is going to be tutoring to some extent or another. I mean, even this deck tutors. I mean, the mana bases are generally circulating around fetch lands. And having this sort of effect can just stymie a lot of folks in progressing the game state in the direction they need to go to win. So, yeah. Aven Mindsensor card's very good. Lingering Souls. Yeah, I just want to run this card. I mean, again, I have Entomb in the deck, so if I really just need to Entomb something to stay alive, you can do that. But really, it's more about, upping the power of, my Faithless Looting cards, my Smuggler's Copter cards that I have in this build of the deck, Liliana the Veil. I just want to be able to get value out of my cards, and I wanted as much as possible my cards to be able to be used once and then have a secondary use. That was kind of the idea, and I think that's kind of a similar, concept to how, Mardu Pyromancer works in Modern. It's a little more aggressive in Modern. You have cards like the double red card that's a 3/4 prowess that draws you 3 cards, discards your hand, draws 3 cards, and it's red 6 or something like that, or red 5, and for every spell, instant or sorcery you have in your graveyard, it's 1 less to cast. I'm not running that card. I always forget that card's name, but I'm not running that one. I didn't think I quite had enough setup for it. I felt like it was too tempo-y for this build, whereas this build's a little more mid-rangey. But you could run it. You could also run the other Pyromancer that, you discard cards in your hand and then draw 2 more. That card's also quite good. Make some 1/1s with it. All right, Matthias, this card is pretty amazing. The first iteration of this build that I ran, I forgot to put this guy in there again. The older ones, I did have him in there. But this build, I started working on it yesterday. I forgot to put this guy in there. This guy's just great. I was talking to Jer about him, and I was like, oh, yeah, I was trying some other interesting cards out. I think I had Rixmati Reveler in here, Bitter Blossom, which is probably just getting dated. And then I also had Deadeye Navigator. It's another weird card that I kind of wanted to have attack the graveyard, but this card's just so good. I was like, yeah, I should just put this card in. So 3/3 Legend, which is kind of a downside for Mardu mana or colors. Has the Menace, and at the beginning of your unstep, put a bounty counter on a creature. When that creature dies, that player's opponent draws a card and gains 2 life. So that's a card engine. This deck kills a lot of creatures. Very good at killing creatures and permanents. So this card's great. I mean, generally speaking, you're going to play this thing out, leave up some removal, tag it with a bounty counter, kill it with instant speed removal, and then draw a card off it, gain some life. Pretty good. All right, Plague Engineer. This card's just effed up against elves, against True Name Nemesises, Flying Men. Oof. The most common cards you name with this are Wizard, Rogue, and Human, and Elf. I've named Goblin with it too. Goblin's pretty good too. But yeah, this card's just pretty messed up. It's a good card for getting a massive advantage. Also, just randomly a 2/2 Death Toucher, which, if it kills off 2 things when you play it and resolve it, and then it blocks something else and trades off with it, pretty good value. Camball, just stop Storm. Like I said, this deck has some significant liabilities against the fast, speedy, kind of uninteractive combo decks. So against decks where spells matter, Camball can make it very difficult for them to kill you with a wide variety of different things it could be Storm, it could be Eggs, you name it, but Camball tends to shut off a lot of that kind of stuff. On that same token, you could also try running in this deck, and I'm not sure if it's not incorrect, or if it's not correct to just have it in here. Harsh Mentor. I really like Harsh Mentor quite a bit. I tend to think Time Vault's one of the best control decks in the format. Combo control in the format, but it's very good. some variety of like maybe Grixis Bant. I can see Esper Vault, with Enlightened Tutor downshifted in points now. But it's quite good, and like Harsh Mentor tends to beat that combo. It makes it so that combo is not a forever lock. Like eventually they have to give the turn up, or they have to find a way to kill it, which just sets the bar higher for them to kind of combo off, especially when it requires specific cards in hand or access to specific cards to actually establish that lock. So it just reduces the quantity of cards they have that could be interaction for the board. So I like that card a lot. I'm not running it right now, but I would not blame you for running Harsh Mentor. Young Pyromancer, yeah, just playing this card because I have so much removal, and I just wanted to have some efficient ways to win games. And Young Pyromancer is very good at winning games. If your opponent's not doing much, or if they're sitting back trying to counter spells, and you're just like blowing stuff up or attacking their hand, even if they're countering that stuff, like you're making 1/1s, and it's like, all right, you're gonna die, and they tend to. Dreadhorde Arcanist, giving this card a run. There's not as many like one-drop spells as there are in most of the blue decks, but there's still a significant amount. A lot of burn, a lot of low-end burn, a lot of hand attack, and then some hard white removal, Tithe, Fatal Push. Just quite a few spells that can definitely pressure folks in this deck. So I think it's fine. Plus it's a 1/3. 1/3s are really nice. Like, you wouldn't normally think it like a 1/3 would be great. 1/3s are pretty good for like a more controlling / mid-rangey deck like this. Just being able to block 2/1s is really good. Alright, Seeker of the Way. This card's kind of underwhelming, and maybe it should come out for like the Harsh Mentor. The only reason I really like this card is because I really wanted to make this deck just be very good at what it's supposed to be good at, which is just beat the living dog crap out of aggro decks. And Seeker of the Way is really good at that. Like, if they don't remove it right away and you get to cast a spell to remove one of their creatures, then you hit them for 3 lifelink. Like, it's just really good. It's really, really good. Or if you just like leave it back and like it just brick walls them because you have mana up and they're just like, well, I can't reasonably attack into this thing because they'll burn off one of my idiots and then like this thing will gain them a bunch of life. It can just do quite a bit in those style of matchups. And frankly, it's so low key, it's so cheap to play that like, even against the more controlling decks, the other mid-range decks, like it's still a fairly good clock and it makes it very tough to race. Soulfire Grandmaster. Like I said, this is a fairly landed deck for the converted mana cost and the spells that are in it. This card, you see this in Jeskai as well. I don't know if it's as good in this deck as it is in Jeskai. It may be. Being able to buy back spells, which this deck has a pretty easy time doing, is very nice. Like, I've bought back, Dread, Terminates against like creature decks, and they're just like, alright, I concede. Just can't beat it. It's just a stupid Terminate on a stick, or whatever, or a Bolt. I think Chain Lightning's another one I've done before. Like, you do quite a few with it. And again, it's just a 2/2 lifelinker that just kind of demands that like aggressive decks answer it. They can't really send the burn at your face unless they want to like, trade off kind of unfavorably on board for you to gain life with it. Dark Confidant, yep, just a card engine on a stick, 2 mana, 2/1, draw an extra card every turn. Take a lot of damage off it, but again, we're gaining a lot of life with this deck, and I think, you just want to have access to cards like this where they just turn into more cards. Weather Wayfarer, same story. We're a Moxen-based deck, so I mean, even if we're on the play, we can kind of play our land short and use this card to get a ton of value out of our deck. We don't have a ton of utility lands, like we're not a strip mine deck, but I still enjoy having access to Weather Wayfarer because, the deck thinning is not that big of a deal, but like having access to the colors of mana you need is pretty much is a very big deal. And even if every card's a card, like even if it's a land card, like they tend to be quite good. Grim, this card's kind of fallen out of favor with a lot of people. I still like it. Again, like I really wanted to make this deck be as good as it could be, I think, against other or against aggressive decks. And this card is very good against aggressive decks. Just tends to hold them in check. And it can chip away incrementally at planeswalkers. It's kind of good at breaking up a board stall. It works good with Matthias. I mean, just 2 direct damage is quite a bit. And this is a deck that'll be putting a lot of cards in its bin. Alright, Shambling Vents over here. This is, I guess, my other utility land. It's an attacking land. I'm not running, Lava Claw Reaches or Needle Spires. I don't think they're that great. This card, though, I actually think is pretty good. It's the 3 toughness on this card plus the lifelink that I kind of like. I've definitely used it to finish off games. Like, I've definitely used it to attack. And I also don't like a ton of tapped lands. Mardu does kind of have the shittiest attacking lands of the creature lands. It's not very good. Like, you don't have access to Creeping Tar Pit. Don't have access to Treetop Village. You don't have access to Celestial Colony, which are probably, in my opinion, the best. And, like, Wandering Fumarole is pretty good, too. 4 is a lot of damage. Not the best creature lands, but this is not a bad one. It's still fine. Smuggler's Copter. This card is just amazing. Another card you could consider in this deck because there are a lot of walkers, and we'll kind of be covering some of those here momentarily. is Hardikiran. Hardikiran is just really big. Like a 4/4 Vigilance flyer is quite large. That's another card you can try out in this deck. I think I'd want to go up a little bit more on Planeswalkers before I did that, though. All right, this is kind of the Mardu pile right here. This is the board impact. This, blow stuff up, and some of it's burned that goes to face. Fire Covenant, yep, this is a one-sided Wrath. We're playing a bunch of lifelink in this deck. We have Soulfire Grandmaster, which means this does no damage to you. If you're not familiar with this card's actually really messed up. Fire Covenant does X damage. You pay X life, and it does X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. So it's a one-sided board wipe that does a bunch of damage to you, but if you have a card like, let's say, Soulfire Grandmaster in play, you just gain all that life back. And generally speaking, if you have like near board parity and you take 10 damage to kill off their entire board of creatures, it's worth it because you're just going to win. This card's very good. Toxic Deluge, also very, very good. Pay X life, all creatures get -X/-X. Just kill them all. Jaretti, Ingenious Iconoclast. This card's kind of weird. I'm not playing a lot of artifacts. I think this card's probably at its best in like the prison style, like lantern control decks. It's kind of a weird card, hard to assess. But probably better in a deck that has more artifacts in it. But I still kind of like it in this deck because it's just a nice grindy tool to kill off creatures and artifacts. It kind of gives you like a 1-turn shatter effect in a deck that has a high volume of tokens, which can be kind of good against like slower draws out of Academy or more grindy draws out of Academy, or maybe more grindy builds of Academy itself, or against like BattleBot style decks where you just need to kill off a bunch of their stuff. It's really just a hard kill spell that puts blockers in the way every turn. Kolaghan's Command, card's just great. Just kill stuff. Gets their hand. Blows up artifacts. Kind of just does a little bit of everything. Gets stuff back for you if you lose important stuff like Bob or something like that. Vindicate, Anguish Unmaking, both being used generally for the same purpose. Obviously different cards. Anguish Unmaking can hit, cannot hit on land permanents. It's only non-land permanents. And you lose 3 life when you do it, but it's an instant, which is kind of nice. And then Vindicate is just anything that's a permanent. At sorcery speed. Murderous Rider, really good at walker control. Also just a threat on the backside. A 2/3 lifelink or something to scoff at. It also goes back into your library if that's relevant for you. Honestly, you'd rather generally have cards in the graveyard, though. But it's fine. It's a very good card. Good 2-for-1 advantage. Artrail, again, just 2-for-1 burn against like the green decks, against like the aggressive white decks, the aggressive red decks. You can just really kind of get them with this. Zealous Persecution, not running a ton of creatures, but running a lot of stuff that makes creatures. So like 17 creatures is probably like an underestimate for how this deck plays. I would say it probably plays more like a 28 creature deck with the walkers that make tokens with like Lingering Souls. There's just quite a few cards that make tokens, so I think 17, despite saying 17 creatures, it's generally significantly higher. It plays like it's a lot higher. Lightning Helix, just pretty stereotypical burn. 3 damage, gain 3 life, instant speed, red and white, great. Terminate, yep, just kills anything, just a creature killing machine. Smiting Helix. So this card's kind of interesting. I actually like it. I kind of actually ended up finding I like this card. So it's 4 mana on the front side. It does 3 damage. You gain 3 life to any target. And then it has flashback for red and white, and it's 3 damage, gain 3 life. So it's basically 2 Lightning Helixes stapled together. It's a little bit more expensive. It's also sorcery speed, so it's not quite the same as that card, but it's kind of similar in some ways. And you can generally 6 damage is a lot, and 6 life is a lot. You can chip away at a lot of different cards with this. Like it's really good at dealing with planeswalkers, flyers, you name it. I've been pretty happy. I've also just killed folks with it. Like 6 is a lot of damage. Ingress Rampage. I'm trying this card out. It can deal with planeswalkers and artifacts is the biggest thing, like swords or like other walkers like Ren and 6. Like it's just a really cheap way to deal with a walker. Sometimes creatures. Sometimes you call creature with it too. Dreadbore, again, walkers, creatures. Like we don't like seeing walkers in this deck. I don't have a ton of creatures to really pressure them. My creatures don't tend to be that big, so like I want to have like direct ways of dealing with them. And in a pinch, this also just kills a creature. Again, sorcery speed, so Alright, Path Swords, yep, they're just mostly in every white deck there is. Fatal Push, yep, pretty much every deck. So, Burst Lightning is one I've kind of been going back to and getting a little more high on. When I run Dreadhorde Arcanist, I tend to like this card. If you're not familiar with Burst Lightning, it's 1 red, instant. It does 2 damage to any target. If you pay a kicker on it, which is 4, so red and 4, it does 4 damage to any target. You could actually do kicker costs from graveyards off Dreadhorde Arcanist, and I kind of have liked this card because it scales well, and it gives you a little bit of flexibility on like how big a thing you can hit with it. So I've been pretty happy with it. Like, I haven't seen it in a ton of decks in a long time, but I think the card's quite good. Flame Slash, 4 damage for 1 mana, sorcery, creature only, pretty good. Fork Bolt, 2-for-1 advantage, just it spreads the love. Lightning Bolt, yep, pretty much in every red deck. Chain Lightning in most red decks, just a very good card. Tainted Pact, find anything in the deck. There are no duplicate lands in this deck, so you can find whatever you need. You'll exile some stuff, but you probably find what you need. Faithless Looting, yeah, card's quite good. It's just good flexibility. This is not a deck that has cantrips in it, so card selection is going to be a little bit tough, so I like having access to cards like Faithless Looting. I could even see running Ransack the Lab if you want to give that a shot. Sensei's Divining Top, again, same idea. we're a more controlling mid-range, grindy deck, so I kind of like having access to effects like Sensei's Divining Top, where it allows me to use fetch lands to kind of filter my draw and find relevant cards when I need them, whether that be interaction or that just be a board-impacting spell to win the game with. Hand Attack, yep. Got as much of it as we can feasibly play. Mind Twist, pointed card, Lily Out of the Veil, Gerard's Verdict, Hymn to Turek, Collective Brutality, Tight Hollow Sculler, Inquisition Duress, and Thoughtseize. Just knock their hand apart. Then the Graveyard Disruption. I think the Lands decks and the Storm decks are still very, very good, even though there's been an upswing in the points for those decks. So you have Yawgmoth's Will at 1 point now, and the Strip Mine at 3. Kaya Orzhov Usurper tends to pressure graveyards quite well. Deathrite Shaman does the same thing. It can just get rid of problematic lands and or sorceries like Loam from the graveyard to kind of hamper your opponent's ability to get continuous resource advantage off of the lands-based engine. And then Nile Spellbomb, you can just put this out against the Storm decks, the lands decks, and it can almost single-handedly win you the game unless they find a Chain of Vapor to bounce it on your EOT, so you can't prevent their shenanigans on their turn. So, guys, that is the build. This is Mardu. Like I said, it's closest analogous deck that it probably plays similarly to is some variety of Grixis midrange, excepting that it uses board-based impacting cards as opposed to counter spells to kind of control, and it probably has a higher threat density in general than Grixis does. So, kind of a tough deck. It's been a tough deck for me to crack because, like I said, I think it's pretty tough to build non-blue and non-green based mid-range decks. And kind of have them fulfill a role that hasn't already been fulfilled by something else. But I do think this deck is one of the best in class at controlling aggressive decks, at curbing aggressive decks. At the cost of some top end success versus the best combo decks that are in the format. So pretty solidly tier 2, but also not a bad deck. I've had pretty good success with it and just in playing. And I've definitely had fun building it. It can be a stressful deck because I think it's in a strategically odd place in the metagame and in the game. But I've had a couple folks ask me about Mardu, and I wanted to do my best to kind of take another stab at it and see if I could come up with a build that I was pretty comfortable could do well in against the top decks. Could have at least a game against top decks. With some of the tech that I put into it, and also had a good median game plan against what else you can expect in the format. And I think I did pretty good. I think this deck's at least a decent tier 2 deck. Yeah, so what I'm going to do now, guys, I'm going to go on a quick pause, and I'll be back momentarily with some gameplay with this Mardu Mancer deck. Be right back at you. Alright guys, we're back playing as Jackie here, Jackie the Puppet. This hand's perfectly acceptable. It's got, turn 2 selection via Tainted Pact, or turn 2 Gerard's Verdict if our opponent has a fast Moxen start. It's got some good board control to come back from behind in the form of Murderous Rider, and it's also got Lily Out of the Veil to kind of knock apart anything that may happen on the board as well that has Hexproof, etc. So you see a pretty fast start from Jackie. I mean, not hugely fast, but pretty fast. They've got Soul Land into a Talisman of Dominance, which is not a slouch. They're going to have up to 4 mana on this turn, which it appears they're probably going to utilize. So they make 4 here. Play on a Narset, Parter of Veil. It's kind of annoying. Because if they hit a Mana Crypt here, so I mean they're probably going to try to wheel me, Time Twister or something like that, which could be problematic. So I'm going to go ahead and just probably hammer their hand here. Yeah, Gerard's Verdict, knock out 2 cards. They discard 2 land cards. Find a Mystic Confluence and leave it up. I opt to leave up Murderous Rider here so I can knock out this Narset. My fear is if they try to go for a Time Twister or something like that. I mean, there's 2 reasons, right? One, I know they have a Mystic Confluence up, so if they go to cast here at EOT to Ancestral Recall, I'll just kill their Narset. Yeah. Which I kind of like doing this play because, I mean, if they do have a Time Twister of some variety, it's going to be really bad to have my hand discarded. Or have my hand, all but 1 card, be discarded, basically. Play on a Grim Monolith. Cool. They already have pretty vast mana advantage, so this doesn't really worry me that much. I'm going to go ahead and try to land a Liliana here. It's probably going to get countered, and it does. Yeah, I just get Cryptic Commanded. I play out the Liliana because I actually think it's probably the least relevant card I have in hand here. I think that. But then I believe this turn that gets proven wrong. I believe they end up playing a Shackles this turn. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, my creatures all kind of stink now. But I'm also so glad I played the Liliana because I would rather not have a creature on board where it just gets eaten. So I don't really have much going on here. So I'm going to opt to, I believe, go second main phase Tainted Pact. No, I don't. I opt to do it on their turn. I guess it's fine. It's kind of tough here to like do much with my mana on my turn after I use the Tainted Pact, so I get doing this. I think my thinking was like maybe I want to go for a Planeswalker like a Chandra or something like that, and try to get a Chandra down and like start just hitting them for 2 a turn. So Tainted Pact here, see Liliana, the Last Hope. It's not very good in this because I don't really want to put creatures down, and I don't think I have that much time to just sit around and try to pump it all the way up. I think I end up taking Kaya. Kaya's fine. Find Savine's Reclamation, also a pretty good card. Get back this Liliana if I'd like it. They also have a pretty thick graveyard, so like I can possibly kill them with this in conjunction with their Mana Crypt, is kind of my thinking. I could have kept going and tried to find like a Chandra specifically, but this is pretty close. It's good enough, I think. They start taking some damage incrementally off their Mana Crypt. It's pretty apparent to me that they don't have much going on in their hand, so they're going to upkeep Castle Vantress here. They play a Thoughtcast to draw through some of it. But they're still not really doing anything relevant. They're just casting a bunch of big artifacts out, which I think I'm kind of fine with. I just go ahead and get back this Liliana and knock out their last card, which is an island. Exile 2 of their cards. They're 2 of the spells, so they can get back with Snapcaster or Torrential Gearhulk. They're probably playing some variety of Prison, would be my guess. So one of the interesting things, if their deck is more well set up to deal with creatures, they're going to have a tough time with my deck. Because I have creatures in my deck, but I don't really need to use them to win. It's kind of one of the cool things about this deck, because it's not really that dependent on creatures. I go ahead and get rid of the Force of Negation they had in hand. I discard it with the Liliana, and then eat up the cards. Cast on a Savine's Reclamation, just to get these lands back. I don't need to do that, but I kind of just want to build up my mana resources and get more of the lands out of my deck. I also think that this game may come down to just casting Helix twice to do 6 damage to them and then doming them with Kaya for, right now it'd be 6, which puts them to 1. And if they lose a Mana Crypt flip, they're just dead. And the more they get to use Castle Vantress, I think the more they're going to get advantage off the top of their deck. I guess they're playing some pretty powerful cards because they have a ton of really powerful mana. They transmute to Area West, I believe, find a Ballista here, a Walking Ballista. Go ahead and get it down for, is it 5/5 or a 4/4? One or the other. Good card. Yeah, 4/4. So they plink the Liliana down, I believe, to 2. And then plink the Kaya for 1, so if I use her, that she dies. I just go ahead and fetch here. I just go ahead and Fatal Push this on their turn to make them use it on their turn. I go ahead and force discards here, just to pump the Liliana back up. Do what I said I was going to do. I just put them down to 1 and say, hey, if your Crypt doesn't flip the right way, you're going to die. They draw. They go ahead and, I think, try to use Castle Vantress here. And then it looks like Bodo may have frozen. But what ends up happening is they lose the Mana Crypt flip and they die. So they die, from 1 right here. So that is this first game. I'll go on a quick pause, guys. We'll come back for game number 2 against this Academy Prison deck that Jackie is running. Alrighty, guys, we're back for game number 2. This hand's unacceptable. It just doesn't have mana. This hand is bad, but it's like a hand I'm going to keep. If I see on the draw, I'll keep this. If I terminate, not exceptional. I just go ahead and Inquisition them here. Let's take a look at their hand and see what I take. So their hand consists of Island, Thought-Knot Seer, Basalt Monolith, Force of Negation, and Tinker. I just go ahead and take the Tinker. It's easily the most powerful card they have. I have a lot of ways to kill creatures, so if their plan is to resolve this Thought-Knot Seer, I could eventually deal with it in some way, shape, or form. They play their land. I don't find my land, so if I miss on red-black mana here, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. I could just not play a game of Magic, but I think it was still an acceptable keep. It was better than going to 5, I think. Alrighty, so they play out the Basalt Monolith, so I know next turn I'm going to get Thought-Knot Seared. I draw into a Weathered Wayfarer, which is not as good as a land, but honestly, it's still pretty fine. If they opt to take one of my powerful cards like Chandra or Liliana with the Thought-Knot Seer, then I'm going to be able to use Terminate on it next turn. If they take Terminate to get some immediate gains off of it, then, I'm able to kind of build into these more powerful cards, which is also just fine. I just go ahead and get Sacred Foundry, put it into play tapped. Could have got a fetch land to set up Savine's Reclamation next turn to go into higher mana count, but I think what the plan is here, I want to get Liliana the Veil down. I'm pretty sure it's going to just get Hardcast Force of Negation on it, which is also kind of just fine. I don't have a problem with that. I think I find Caracas. No, not yet. I just go ahead and try to slam this Liliana. It gets force negation right away, which is fine. Like, I got to fight through that card at some point in time, and I'm not going to wait around for discard. I'm just going to force him to use it on Liliana, which I don't think is going to be that much higher impact than just killing this Thought-Knot Seer, which is not bad, but it's also like just not great either. They play on a Warm Power Stone and Personal Tutor for Time Twister. So I don't know what the last card in their hand is, but I go ahead and find out here. I just try to cast on this Palace Jailer to get it. They have Pact of Negation, which means the Twister's not going to happen. The cool thing is, like, I'm going to be able to Kolaghan's Command to kill the Warm Power Stone and knock the Twister out of their hand. So they're going to be stuck at 0 cards, or basically at the top of their deck. I get it from 4 down to 8, so I'm kind of getting beat up here, but like I'm not too worried about just dying to damage this game. They can find a Walking Ballista and get lucky, and that would stink, but I think I'm fine taking that risk. I use Savine's Reclamation here just for mana efficiency and to build up mana for the next turn. Go ahead and knock the Time Twister out and Warm Power Stone. I leave the Wayfarer back, intending on blocking here just to salvage the damage. If I go to 2, dying to Walking Ballista becomes much more of a reality, so I'd rather not. They untap their Basalt Monolith. I go ahead and block here. Find a Mox Pearl. Go ahead and just kill this thing to get another card. Find Grim Lavamancer. Well, I unfortunately don't have the mana to cast it, so it is what it is. I believe they draw into Nada, or yeah, they draw into Impulse, and I believe do nothing. No, they do something. Plan on Tezzeret. Tezzeret's cool. I think they just find a Darksteel Citadel with it. I'm just going to kill Tezzeret next turn with this Queen Marchesa and the land, more than likely. Alrighty. Let's go, Moto. I know they find Darksteel Citadel, if I recall the game correctly. My guess is they're just running Tezzeret for, like, you know, effects that stop people from attacking them. Well, the replay may have broken. I may have to restart Moto. Well, the long and short of it, this game is this, guys. So I'm not going to try to replay this game because it's pretty close to its termination. They play a Tezzeret here, but they don't have, like, some sort of backbreaking card to find with it. They just find a 0-drop. They find a 0-drop land, Darksteel Citadel. On the following turn, I use Chandra to make 2 red mana. And I believe... Yeah, 2 red mana plus black-white, and cast the Queen Marchesa and activate the Shambling Vent. Attack the Tezzeret to kill it, gaining 2 life up to 8. On the following turn, dome them for 2 off the Chandra, plus hit them for 2 off the Shambling Vent, and 3 off the Marchesa, plus 3 off of the Smiting Helix, and resolve the Grim Lavamancer. And then by the following turn, they're just dead. So that's kind of how the game goes. We kill this Tezzeret, and they brick for 2 turns, and we just kill them. That's kind of one of the risks that these more powerful, like blue-based artifact, you know, like Tolarian Academy style decks can kind of run into, is that they do have a lot of dog shit draws. You know, and if you're able to kind of grind them out, like we kind of did here with the Kolaghan's Command, with the Savine's Reclamation, with the Jailer, with Chandra, got a lot of 2-for-1s in this game. A lot of 2-for-1s, and we had just the right amount of value stick around with Chandra, with this Critter land, and then with the Queen Marchesa, which is going to give us the Monarchy, so we're hitting our land drops and hitting more relevant spells than they are. But just kind of chip them out and win the game. So anyways, guys, I'm going to go on a quick pause, probably refire Moto, because it seems like replays are kind of struggling, and we'll be back momentarily with more games with Mardu, a Midrange, or Mardu Pyromancer. Alright guys, we're back playing against Luca here. Luca tends to play like a Madness-based deck, which is kind of an interesting deck. This hand's acceptable. It's nothing special, but it's fine. This is when I was still running Rick's Mighty Reveler. This card came out. Alright, so I was testing the card out. I was just not happy with it. They go ahead and duress me, get my Terminate. I just blow up their land here. Their deck's really dependent on its mana to actually function. I just go ahead and get the Rick's Mighty down. I believe get rid of the Aven Mind Sensor. I don't think it's necessary against their deck. They don't tutor a ton. I opt to leave up the Murderous Rider here and the Anguished Unmaking. If they don't do anything, I'll Anguished Unmaking their Smuggler's Copter. If they fire the Smuggler's Copter up, I'll just Murderous Rider it. I just go ahead and Anguish Unmaking the Copter. I really don't want that thing fixing their hand. Plus, their deck, because it is kind of a 3 to 4 color Madness deck, tends to get a lot of mana advantage off of discarding cards. They play out the Ironcrag Pyromancer. I just blow it up with the Murderous Rider here. They haven't played anything else, but I think it's still prudent here just to get down the Palace Jailer to get more cards. I'm down to 9 likes. I've been hurting myself with my mana base, but I don't think in this matchup it matters that much. I don't think they're going to burn me out very easily. I'll just get down the Murderous Rider this turn, more than likely. Yeah. Drawing to a duress, drawing to a mox diamond, not really drawing anything too hot, but they found a spell here. I believe it's a kill spell. Yeah, violent eruption to kill everything but the murderous rider, which is fine by me. Murderous rider is a life linker. It's going to put me up to 11 and them down to 7. And I still have Vindicate plus the an ongoing monarchy emblem. They go ahead and cast a Psychotic Episode, evidently decide that the top card of my deck's too good, put it to the bottom, allow me to keep my hand intact. I go and get this Liliana down ticker to get back the Palace Jailer, just in case they play anything. I have 2 spells to deal with the board. They don't have a board right now. They're down to 7. I draw to an Arc Trail. They're pretty much just dead here. And they go ahead and pack it in. Tougher matchup for the Madness deck. The Madness deck really depends on its early creatures to stick around, to like Looter Zilkor, like Merfolk Looters, etc., to really stick around for a long time. So if they get killed instantly, it's very tough for them to kind of get advantage. Like a lot of their cards cost 4 and 5 mana if they're just hard cast, but they cost 2 to 3 mana if they're discarded then cast for the Madness cost. So it tends to be kind of tough if those engine cards, like the Looter Zilkor and the Merfolk Looters and whatever, if those get blown up right away, it's really tough for them to kind of grind on you, because the way the deck's built is it gets basically gets a rebated mana cost on cards that are better than that cost. So 4 3s and 4 4s for 2 to 3 mana is pretty good comparative to 5 mana or 6 mana that they cost on their face value. So when you knock those parts of it out and the deck's kind of forced to play their cards face up, it's very challenging for them. That's kind of what Mardu, it's kind of one of the things Mardu's good at, is just controlling the board. So yeah, managed to get this first one very convincingly, and we'll go to game 2 here momentarily, guys. Alrighty, we are back. This hand's fine. It's kind of a little bit risky, but it's got removal, it's got recursion, it's got lingering souls. I'm going to try it out. Wharf Infiltrator, great card, but it's probably not going to do it here. Play on a tap, land on the Mox Diamond. They get on a Bazaar. Bazaar is not the best for me. That's kind of bad, actually. I believe I get lucky and hit a Vindicate, which I just do this right away. The reason I Vindicate this before combat is because I just want to see if they're going to be able to play a creature that can block these things. As it turns out, they have Just the Wind, which goes ahead and kills one of my spirits, but I don't feel too bad about that exchange. I could have also Inquisitioned them first, but if they have it in their hand, they're just going to get rid of it with Bazaar response to Inquisition and get rid of one of my tokens. I do knock out the Bloodghast. I managed to get the Liliana with the Inquisition of Kozlak, and we know that they're on a card that I don't know anymore. The Swamp was the last card they had in their hand after Inquisition, though. I go ahead and Savine's Rector to get a land back and put this card in my graveyard so I can get back more walkers later on down the road. And I've got 3 power, they've got 2, so I feel pretty good about the clock math here. I just go ahead and fetch for a tap, find a Burst Lightning. Not a bad card. It can definitely change combat math if they don't have a relevant threat to play on this next turn. I believe they do, though. I believe they just actually hardcast an Arrogant Worm here. Yes, they hardcast a 4/4 Trampler for 5, which, again, for 3 mana, that's a really good card. For 5 mana, not so much. I'm pretty happy to find Entomb. What I do here is I believe I just Entomb, a good walker. I Entombed Duretti. I think I probably could have done better than Duretti, but I kind of want to try him out here. So I'm going to tell you right now, I think you could have done better than Duretti if you were playing the deck from my perspective. You could just get Kaya, which is probably better than Duretti is. But I get Duretti because I just want to try him out. And I don't think I'm losing this game very easily. Basically anything any creature they cast here, I can just blow up. I have this Mox Diamond to throw away and kill their next creature. I can make more 1/1s, just block their creatures. So they go ahead and pack it in. Just kind of not a very good spot for them. But the Entomb Savine's Reclamation was pretty cool. Managed to get some pretty good value out of that this game. Again, don't take Duretti. Duretti was an experimental pull there. I felt like I was so far ahead in the game that any walker would do. And I was like, let's try Duretti out. He should be pretty good. And I don't know if he was great, but as it turns out, he was just good enough. Anyways, guys, that was our game against 4-color Madness, non-white Madness. We'll be back momentarily with more gameplay with Mardu against some other variety matchups. Alright, guys, we're back for the third game in this set. This hand is not great, but I want to try it in the dark. It's got a Sensei's Dividing Top to find more gas. It's got some early board interaction with Lightning Helix, and then it's got a Mind Twist to kind of mise my opponent out. They're on low resources at 4 cards in hand after their land play, but they're on the draw. I believe it was a Mold of 5. I hit a Lightning, which is just pretty savage. So whatever creature they play here, I'm pretty much just going to auto-kill. But they go ahead and Wasteland me, even though they're on lower resources. I guess it is what it is. If If you got a ton of lands in hand, you just wasteland there to hope maybe I don't hit. But like, they know I've got 3 more lands in hand. I get a Bob down here, which is going to draw back my Sensei Sifting Top, so it's kind of essentially a Phyrexian Arena. They play out a card that I can kill with Lightning Helix, and I will. Go ahead and play out my Sunbaked Canyon here and the Sensei Sifting Top, which I'll flip back EOT to just draw with Bob again. Hit them for 2. They play out an Evason's Pilgrim. Cool card. I just go ahead and draw the Savine's Reclamation off top with Sensei Sifting Top. Take one off the Sensei Sifting Top from my Bob trigger and draw to a Bolt. Go ahead and Blightning their hand, getting rid of the last 2 cards they have, which is Cartel Aristocrat and Knight of the Reliquary. So I'm pretty much thinking like they're on a Sandy B deck, Sandra Bullock deck, or Pattern Rector. It's a deck that wins the Protean Hulk. They go ahead and kill off my Bobo, but I've got Savine's Reclamation, which I can just get the Bobo back with. Play out the top. Play out the Deathrite Shaman, and I pretty much can't lose now. They're so far behind on resources due to the mulliganing early. The Blightning just tore apart their 2 good cards. Well, the 1 good card they had and also the Aristocrat, which is good in their deck, but not really a great card, generally speaking. But the Knight of the Reliquary is very good. I'm just sitting here drawing a bazillion cards. Again, kind of drawn out from here. Like, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to win with me with this much card selection, this many extra cards. They go ahead and Diabolic Intent, but they're going to be dead on the next turn. I'm going to hit them for 2 on the EOT by eating up their Diabolic Intent with the Deathrite Shaman. 2 more off tide on the next turn for a total of 4, plus hit for 3 with my Bob and my Dreadhorde Arcanist. And I also have 2 additional damage in the form of Kolaghan's Command in hand, so they're basically at a -2 effectively here. And they go ahead and pack in the game. On to a game number 2 against Sandra Bullock and or Pattern Rector. Alrighty, guys, we're back. And this hand is like on the verge. I keep it, but like this hand can go either way. I could easily lose this hand if I don't really run into mana sources here. I just put out the fetch land so I don't get wastelanded here. Looks like I'm not going to find my my land here, so I just go ahead and play out the Bitter Blossom here. Figure it's probably going to give me the... It's just going to give me a long-term engine. I could have also played out the Smuggler's Copter in hopes I hit a land, but I don't have a creature to play, so I think it makes sense. They have a lot of mana. They go ahead and find a 4-drop, which happens to be Pattern Rector. So I don't really care for this play by the OP because they don't have a sack outlet in play. It just expose it to too much on white. I have to go ahead and anguish on making this card, because if they do have a sack outlet, which the chances are pretty good, it's going to be very problematic for me. Well, I find their sack outlet, making this a little bit awkward. Get in for 2 and put me down to 11. I go ahead and make another fairy. I just go ahead and get the last card out of their hand, which is a Walking Ballista, and force them to use their Kasali Pride Mage on my Bitter Blossom. Not really happy to lose it, but, you know, it is what it is. I go ahead and Dreadbore the sack outlet, the Viscera Seer. The sack outlets are pretty important to their deck. I'm going to leave my cards back because I really don't want them attacking me for 3 while I'm only hitting them for 2. They unfortunately draw Survival of the Fittest off the top of their deck, and now I am pretty handily losing the game. That card single-handedly... I mean, I think I could have turned this game without Survival being drawn, but I think I'm in a very bad spot unless I find like a Vindicate or something along those lines to kind of stop what's going on. So they find Revelark plus Karmic Guide, which if you're not aware is kind of a loop. It's a pretty bad... It's not like a infinite loop, but it's a loop that'll keep on going back and forth. So I can't just Toxic Deluge and win the game on the board here. If I blow up the board, I'll get rid of a bunch of little 1/1s and like Mana Dorks, but they're going to have their Karmic Guide into Revelark back and be able to get back an additional 1-drop creature, which will more than likely be the Viscera Seer to allow them to keep on doing this. So I'm kind of in a rough spot where like the Toxic Deluge is really not very useful to me. I kind of have to block this thing while kind of getting value off my token makers and try to out-tempo them, i.e. hope they don't draw good cards. Unfortunately, I'm not so lucky. I just go ahead and ditch the Toxic Deluge. May have been hasty to do that just to like buy myself time, because it will buy me time, but it's not going to really get rid of the problem. Unfortunately, they have Restoration Angel, which blinks the Revelark, and I get totally blown out in combat. This is a very feasible possibility that could have happened anyways because of Survival of the Fittest. They had the mana if they just had any creature to find the Angel. I like attacking with both here. I'm looking for a tempo win, but I'm so far behind on the race right now that I'm probably not going to be able to get there. They, draw into a Primeval Titan. They haven't even had to really use this Survival of the Fittest. But I'm pretty dead here. Pardon me, guys. I blow up the 2 Mana Dorks to try to limit their mana a bit. I don't think it matters all that much. I don't have to block here. I probably could, but I'll go ahead and find a Sun-Baked Canyon, go ahead and sacrifice it right away, find another land, make a 1-1 on the ground, and hang back because I can't really do anything. They go ahead and ditch the... basically what I told myself here is if they drew any creature and they survival here, they're going to find a sack outlet. If they find a sack outlet, they can just win the game. One of the problems with their play that kind of slowed down their win in this game is that they played out the Academy Rector too soon, and I was able to get it with the Anguish on making an exile it. If they have access to Academy Rector, they would have won last turn. And the way that would have worked is they would have played out the Academy Rector, sacrificed it got it to play, sacrificed the Revelark to get back the Viscera Seer and the Karmic Guide getting back the Revelark. At that point, they have a sack outlet plus both Revelark and Karmic Guide in play, plus the Academy Rector. They sacrifice the Academy Rector to go and find Pattern of Rebirth, put it on any other creature in play, and then sack it to find Protean Hulk. Then with the sack outlet, they can sack Protean Hulk to find a creature that kills me, like Siege Rhino. Just does 3 life loss, they gain 3 life, plus whatever other cards they want to find. And then they can use the Viscera Seer to sack... it would have to be the Siege Rhino and Safi Eric's daughter. So Siege Rhino dome me for 3. They would be able to at that point in time sack Safi Eric's daughter to target the Angel, the Karmic Guide. Actually, they wouldn't even have to at that point. They could just actually sack the Karmic Guide, sack the Siege Rhinoceros, sack the Safi, targeting Revelark, sack Revelark. Revelark goes away, comes back, brings back the Safi plus the Siege Rhino, and then I'm at -2. And that loop can go forever. It basically just drains me out from whatever life total I'm at. It's infinite life loss and infinite gain for them. So anyways, because they exposed it early, they didn't quite have the fast kill here. But I knew as soon as they ditched a creature to survival, I didn't have to see what they're going to find. Anything is going to beat me here. So, yeah. I just go ahead and pack it in, and we go on to Game 3. Be right back at you guys. Alrighty, guys, we're back. This is kind of a cool matchup, too. I really think this deck, I think Sandy B's a really cool deck. This hand, again, is a little bit risky. It needs to draw mana sources, but it's got a lot of board interaction. They play on a Mana Dork, which I'm happy with. I kind of want to see a Mana Dork here as opposed to a discard spell. I just want to employ these removal spells. They play out the Fauna Shaman, just going to kill it. Happily draw land, go ahead and just Dreadbore this thing, play out the Deathrite Shaman, which is going to up me by a mana count next turn. They duress me, but I think they make a player here, and we talk about it afterwards. Oftentimes, you don't really see this card a ton. Smiting Helix is kind of a weird card. I think the only deck that really wants to run it is this deck right here, Mardu, Midrange. They actually take the Mardu, or the Smiting Helix away. I think the right card to take was actually Jaretti Ingenious Iconoclast, because Jaretti just really represents a long-term kind of advantage engine. I'm never going to be able to use the ultimate, but it's just having an onboard removal spell is really good. And then, I think even before, Smiting Helix, you probably want to take Path to Exile. Path to Exile is really problematic for their deck because it's instant speed removal that exiles, and they do have a lot of specific components that they want to keep to maintain a combo loop. If I just exile an imperative part before they're able to get a sack outlet down, or if I just get rid of their sack outlet, I can make the game very difficult for them. Not impossible by any means, but it definitely makes it a little more difficult to go off. Especially if the other pilot knows how Sandy B works, and I'm familiar with this deck. I know how it works. So go ahead and just ditch their duress, do 2 damage to them down to 17. Make another token. I'm just going to go ahead and Arc Trail this thing so I can get in some incremental damage. And also fuel my graveyard with spells so I can keep on using the Deathrite Shaman. They play a Renegade Rallier. Not going to be too hard to kill. I'll probably just use the Jaretti to get rid of it unless I draw another removal spell. Go ahead and exile the Flame Slash. Find a land. Just go ahead and eat this thing. Get rid of it now. I don't want to give them any board advantage. If they're running Birthing Pod or Natural Order, it's just not worth leaving a creature on the board. Especially when I have a pretty free removal spell like Jaretti. I go ahead and find a threat, an actual threat. Most of my threats right now are kind of bad. That's one of the issues you'll find with Mardu is it does not close games very fast. It's very good at kind of board controlling and just getting into positions of pretty strong advantage. But it has a tough time closing games out. It's just not very quick. You could definitely make it more aggressive if you wanted to, and I've considered builds running cards like Rotting Regisaur just to beat people to death. But at that point, the deck kind of starts losing distinguishability, and it doesn't really have at that point, it doesn't tend to have as good like long-term engines like the Planeswalkers. I draw into Gideon here. I don't really need to play Gideon. I believe I do. Yeah, I'd go ahead and play him here. And yeah, I go ahead and play it out. Leave up Zealous Persecution plus Path to Exile. I have both access to both cards, and they're very dead on the next turn. They go ahead and attempt to play out a Feldar Guardian, blinking their forest. This gives them access to 3 more mana. They go ahead and Eldritch Evolution it, finding Revelar, but they're still dead. I can just use the Path to Exile, which they know about via the Duress they cast earlier, and yeah, just get them here. So yeah, pretty interesting games against Sandy B. Yeah, just kind of got to see Mardu just kind of grind through their creatures. It's kind of what this deck is really good at. Like, when you start playing against other creature decks, I think in general you should be fairly advantaged against most other creature decks, especially creature decks that are really dependent on specific components to go through a loop-style or engine-based combo. So, anyways, guys, got hybrid combo here. Quick pause. We'll be back for the next game in this series of games. Alright guys, back. We're playing against Evermist in this game. I don't think I've played Evermist before. I think this is the first time. I keep this hand. I don't know if it's right or not. I don't know what they play, so I'm like, yeah, I'll keep it. It's kind of good in the open. So, I take kind of an interesting card here. I think the greedy to take here is probably going to be Sylvan Library. Their hand's really depending on drawing lands. And like with Sylvan Library, they probably will. I could just not take the Dome. The Domri is a more big long-term problem. It's kind of a big problem long-term. I have this Vindicate, but they have a lot of good 2-for-1 threats in hand. Their hand's very threat dense. So the problem that I foresee is if they get a little fortunate and they just keep on hitting lands, their hand's going to very rapidly overwhelm this hand that I have. So I need to kind of find a threat fast. So this hand's already kind of down a card if I use Mox Diamond. I kind of unfortunately draw Faithless Looting. I don't have access to my red mana, so I pitch one of my red cards just to cast Faithless Looting, which already puts me down an additional card. So I'm down a lot of resources here, and, in retrospect, I think I had to make this play based on keeping this hand, but I don't like where it puts me. I have a Gideon here. So, I have a decent follow-up threat. I'm really hoping they miss lands or have to take 8 off of this thing to try to find their next land. They unfortunately don't. They find their land, play a mana dork out that they evidently found from the top or in the last draw step. And I'm a little bit low on resources here because I burned up 2 resources with Chrome Mox and I burned up 2 resources with the Faithless Looting. They finally take their first 4 off Sylvan Library here. It's a Wasteland plus a Mox. And they go ahead and play out Huntmaster of the Fells. This card will be problematic because I'm already kind of very close to Hellbent. And I'm going to need to cast a spell every turn so that Huntmaster doesn't kind of overwhelm my board. I just go ahead and make a dude here. I don't think I should have attacked here. I don't think it would have mattered, but I don't think I should have done it. I was kind of hoping to find a tempo line here. They unfortunately have the removal spell, which is a card they found because we didn't know about it from the beginning with that Thoughtseize. They go ahead and play out the Domri, another Domri. This is a new Domri. So they found another Planeswalker too. I go ahead and get their Domri for 2 to make sure it can't fight, or to make it so it can't fight, basically. Because they ultimate this Incubation Druid, or just fire up the Stirring Wildwood, they can fight by night and kill it. And like I said, I don't think I'm in a good spot here, but I want to leave ounce to myself top decking Toxic Deluge or Fire Covenant. Fire Covenant maybe not as good here because I can't deal with all the creatures because Shalai gives them all hexproof. It'd have to be probably Toxic Deluge. And at that point, they're still on an active library. They still have a creature land. They still have a Planeswalker in play. Draws just didn't line up well, and this probably wasn't the matchup to keep the hand that I kept. I think this hand that I kept is pretty decent against control. I think it's pretty decent against aggro, but I think against Naya, pretty much just pure mid-range with creature lands and whatnot, it's kind of a bad hand to keep because it has multiple 1-for-2 cards that give me mana advantage and then just card selection. And really, you just want to have good stuff in the mirrors. You want to just have a bunch of good stuff cards, a bunch of walkers, a bunch of 2-for-1 cards, not a bunch of 1-for-2 cards that give you more speed. If our opponent had gotten a little less fortunate on the Sylvan Library and maybe missed a couple land drops, I think we possibly could have solidified our initial gains with Gideon into a win. Going back to initial decision making with the Thoughtseize, it's possible we should have just taken Sylvan Library to kind of hope to fade a couple land drops. But I don't tend to like playing that way, especially in the mid-range mirrors. They're going to play 35 to 36 lands, normally speaking. They're probably on a mock spread. We probably can guess they're running mana dorks, and we know they have access to green mana via the Wooded Foothills. So the chances of them having mana is going to be pretty good over time. But yeah, as it pans out, their hand curved out pretty well. Despite being a two-lander, and they were on the draw, and turboing out, at a cost of cards. Our Gideon just wasn't enough to get there. So we go on to game 2, and hopefully we end up getting them there. Alrighty, guys, we're back. This hand's more like it for a mid-range mirror. It's got Grim Lavamancer to control mana dorks, fetch land to kind of fuel the Mancer, Zealous Persecution to win in combat. The tutor stopper in the form of Aven Mind Sensor, plus a Painted Pack Now to kind of get after the right cards, and then Chandra TOD is just a good engine card that also removes. They play on a Scavenging Ooze. I just go ahead and Tainted Pact here. I believe I look for a 2-for-1 discard spell. I'm actually thinking in my head Kolaghan's Command or a Hymn to Turek. I find Hymn to Turek first. This is going to allow me to burn off the Scavenging Ooze with my Grim Lavamancer and also hymn them. So I hymn them, hit their land, and their Chandra Torch of Defiance. They're on an open board now and lost a land and a Scavenging Ooze. They don't evidently have another land, so I go ahead and fetch here, finding probably a Scrubland. Go ahead and play out the Chandra, dome them for 2, and then attack for 1. And they're in a pretty rough spot now. They're down to 3 cards. I'm down to 3 cards, but I have mana advantage and a lot of board advantage. And they just go ahead and pack it in here. That's just game. So much better hand in the mid-range mirrors. Quick pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily. Alrighty, guys. We're back. Alright, so this hand is acceptable. It's got some early interaction on the draw, which I tend to like the hand attack on the draw. Inquisition is good on the draw. It's got a Chain Lightning if they have a Dork play, or if they play a Mother of Runes, something like that. It's got a Plague Engineer if they have multiple kind of homogenous creatures, like humans will probably tend to be one, or elves will tend to be one you'll name in this matchup. And then it's got a good long-term play / mid-term play in the form of Gideon, which could just end games really well. So this hand's got a little bit of everything going on. Unfortunately, sometimes you just eat a ranch sandwich. So our opponent has a very strong draw. I just go ahead and get rid of Giver of Runes. In retrospect, it may have made sense to actually Inquisition here, but I think that, at this point in time, it probably makes the most sense. Or I could have just gotten rid of the Incubation Druid. I don't know. It's really tight. Incubation Druid may have made more sense to try to fade a 5-drop. I do think you Chain Lightning here. I don't think you Inquisition, but there's definitely a debate as to whether or not you hit the Incubation Druid or you hit the Giver of Runes here. But yeah. They go ahead and play out a Mother of Runes. Mother of Runes is not horrible to see because I can kill that with the Plague Engineer. I go ahead and Inquisition them. They have just a man land in hand, so they have the Stirring Wildwood. They hit me for 3 here, so I still feel like. And then they drew this. I'm like, oh god, now I can't cast my spell on curve. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna die. So I get hit for a bazillion here. They probably drew something because they didn't attack with their man land. I go ahead and kill off their Mother of Runes. They play out a 5-drop here, Archangel Avacyn, and I believe kill me on this turn. So, we had a pretty interesting Game 1 and Game 2. I think Game 1 kind of ties back to some. Well, Game 1 ties to not knowing what the matchup was, and in the dark, making a calculated decision to keep a hand that was risky in the widest variety of matchups. In mid-range mirrors, I did not like that hand because it had to 1-for-2 itself. In order to kind of get some fast mana progression off Chrome Mox, and it wasn't really helped by the fact that we drew into Faithless Looting, and I was pretty dependent on the Chrome Mox to fix for my red mana to cast the spells that I had in hand. So we ended up losing that one because it wasn't a hand that had good equity in a grindy kind of mid-range matchup where card quality was going to be quality and depth was going to be important. Game 2, we kind of played, a more typical, I think, kind of mid-range draw mid-range draw. They got a little bit mana screwed because we were able to hit them with a Hymn to Turek and take them off their 3rd land drop, and they kind of got stuck, and we kind of just rode that advantage out. This game, they had a very good draw. And that's the thing that could happen for either of our decks, right? Because I'm on a 3 mox spread as well. I could just as easily draw 2 mox in. And this could just have easily have been, a game where, the board was wiped by turn 1 or turn 2. Having access to Cradle plus 2 Moxen and multiple low drop creatures this early, and top deck can get into 2 very powerful legendary cards in basically one after another. Thalia was one of the better draws because it takes me off of casting the Plague Engineer early enough to have it make a relevant difference. And it also puts all my lands into play tap, so like I'm not playing, my 4-drop on curve, etc. Just very, very, very tough spot here in this last game, and it's one of the things that can happen in Canadian Highlander 2. Like sometimes you just get high rolled, and it's also an appeal to it too. It's an appeal and it's kind of a detractor, right? Like you take some of the good with the bad, and a lot of times in these games, like I always say, about 33% of games, they're maybe not, ostensibly unwinnable, but they're unwinnable. This one right here is pretty clearly, I think, unwinnable given my holdings. But it's a hand that I wouldn't toss back. Like, even if I knew this was going to happen, I think, I guess if I knew it was going to happen, I'd try to mulligan and do like a high roll hand. But I think this is a very perfectly acceptable keep, and our opponent just kind of had the goods, and we kind of got run over. That's certainly a thing that can happen. You'll see that, when folks have like multiple Moxen draws. You also see it with like the Soul Ring and the Mana Crypt decks, right? So end up losing this one, and we get a secondary match against Evermist here. So stand by, and we'll get another match against Evermist here with their Naya midrange deck versus Mardu midrange. I think also worth noting, their style of deck, which their style of deck is like a Naya, just high card quality mid-range deck, is going to be actually generally a tougher matchup for this deck, because this deck has a lot more technology in it to kind of beat up on like the I don't want to say it, like the top decks of the format, like the Storm decks, like the good combo decks. Whereas I think their deck is really well adjusted to beat up on mid-range decks and to beat up on aggressive decks, but pretty much forgoes beating up on like the big control decks. And it has some walkers, but like the big control decks, I think the combo decks are going to be darn near impossible for them to beat. Not impossible, but like very, very hard. Like if Storm keeps a good draw, like this is a turn 5 kill, but Storm kills by turn 4, right? So it's like they didn't have a lot of disruption. I guess they did have some with like Thalia, Heretic Cathar, but like it was mostly just speed. Not a lot of disruption, not a lot of interaction, not a lot of interplay. Mostly just speed here with the Moxen draws and high card quality. So, and I'm not saying their deck's bad. I'm just saying that like they're very well attuned to beat up on aggro and mid range decks. But I think what they cede for having that advantage is control matchups and then like combos. So the reason I think they're a little advantage against us is I think our deck is a little bit more matchup neutral. I think it probably diversifies a little bit of its equity across the matchup density that's available in the format to have a little more game against the combo heavy kind of builds and like the control builds, the blue decks in the format as well. So anyways, guys, quick pause. We'll be back momentarily for the next match play against Evermist here. Alrighty, guys, you're back. Hand's acceptable. It's got early interaction. It's got a card engine. It's got removal, and it's got graveyard disruption. / damage / kill any 0-drops / 1-drops. So they play a land, say go. They unfortunately mulligan down to, I want to say 5. Yeah, 5. All right, go ahead and fetch my land. Play out my Dark Confidant here. They played out a forest, so removal is not very likely at instant speed. Play out a Throne of the High City. Play out a Paradise Druid. Okay. I start drawing here. I'm just going to go ahead and make a bunch of mana, Angrass Rampage, get rid of this thing, and then draw. I go ahead and get rid of the creature and the burn. Go ahead and attack him for 2. Down to 18. No need to play the Mox out here. They play on an Incubation Druid. Great. Go ahead and attack. I mean, they may block. I highly doubt it, but if they do, I don't want to waste the removal first. I go ahead and burn this thing off, play out the Kaya, eat up their graveyard, putting 2 cards into exile, and getting some incremental life. Try to look for lands here. I get rid of the Graveyard Disruption and the Zealous Persecution. I think I'm going to have a pretty easy time keeping the board open, so I don't see a reason in keeping Zealous Purrs. Find a Mind Twist. Yeah, Mind Twist is pretty savage. I'm just going to twist them for their whole, all but one card in their hand, and hope I don't get, like, Luxodon Smiter. Eat up the 2 creature card. I think it's a Giver of Runes and Thragtusk, and they have a Gideon Lightning Bolt still in the bin. I believe they just pack it in here. I don't think they draw land, and they can't cast their spells, and Mind Twist just got most of their hand, so even if they do cast spells, they're way behind on resources, and we just kind of have them here. So, anyways, guys, we'll go on to the next game. This one, kind of rough. They mulliganed a bit. They were on the draw, which I think mulliganing to 5 on the draw is still it's a lot more winnable than mulliganing to 5 on the play. You know, definitely not winnable like going to 5, but it's definitely not as easy in these mid-range matchups where like we're just gonna grind on each other. Like I'm firing off cards like Mind Twist. It's just it's tough. So anyways, quick pause, guys. We'll come back for the next game in this match set. Alrighty, round 2 against Evermist. This hand's nothing special, but it's fine. They play a tap land out. I'm just going to go ahead and wasteland him here. I kind of like wastelanding turn 1 here. I normally don't like it, but I don't have white mana, and I kind of want to develop my draws here, and maybe I just randomly take them off of mana with that wasteland. And if I hit the white mana, I have the Savine's Reclamation to wasteland them again. They play out the Paradise Druid. I'm like, okay, well, if they do something crazy, like tap this, then I can just kill it. I play out a Peasy because if they don't do anything, I'll play out the Godless Shrine and get back the wasteland. They path this thing, but I'm fine kind of getting ramped up on mana. I go ahead and Savine's Reclamation the Wasteland back, blow up their tapped dual land, because they didn't play a land last turn, and now, tapping the Druid is kind of risky, because if it taps, or they attack with it, I can probably kill it. They can probably expect that I'll kill it. I just find a fetch land here, go ahead and fetch with it. I'm just going to use Savine's Reclamation to keep them off of mana. I want to do this to kind of buy draw steps. I don't think it's that high impact to be wastelanding them here, because, the most likely draw in their deck is mana, but they've shown that they're kind of a they're a mana-heavy deck. Mana-heavy Naya, mid-range deck. So I kind of want to just, screw with their mana as much as I can. I find a T-Dale here, and because I don't really have much other action going on, I opt just to kill this thing off, just to buy more time. Again, just kind of using it as a wasteland. They don't find their land. They're stuck on a forest. I finally find a threat. Go ahead and run it out. And now I have access to recurring Terminate. I could use Kolaghan's Command to start nugging away at their hand, recurring it on the next turn. I don't even know if I would do that. I think I would probably wait on Kolaghan's Command, because it's possible that they have cards like No Hide Ferox, Luxodon Smiter is much more likely. The Wiltleaf, is it Wiltleaf Liege? Giltleaf Liege. There's a Liege that is hybrid 3 white-green mana 1 and gives +1/+1 to all green creatures, +1/+1 to all white creatures. Is a 4/4. They could have that thing too. There's cards that you could discard out of their hand that you would not want to, because they just come right into play. Baloth is another one. Obstinate Baloth is another one you could they could just have and Kolaghan's Commanded out, and then I'm looking to have to terminate on the following turn. But right now I've got Terminate on a stick with the with Recursion off the Soulfire Grandmaster, just a ton of removal, and we've kind of effectively mana screwed them. This game, Savine's Reclamation definitely shined. I do think the card's quite powerful. I mean, just wastelanding 3 times is still pretty good. And I've had some games where the upside is getting back a walker and a wasteland or a fetch land. That's still pretty good. Double walkers is a thing too with this deck, so. Yeah, I was pretty happy with this game. It definitely bought me a lot of time to kind of dig into my threats. That said, the hand was a little more risky because it wasn't that threat heavy. It didn't have threats at all. But it was able to definitely control and kind of get to a point where it's going to be very tough for my opponent to kind of break out of this. Anyways, guys, had 1-1 split versus Evermist. I think their last hand they had was a little more high rolly. Tough hand to beat. Kind of just had the goods. And then the match one we had in this game, they got hemmed. Unfortunate. They had a mulligan, they got hemmed, so kind of unfortunate for them. They didn't really get to play that game. So kind of, I kind of high rolled them. And in this game, similar kind of story. Their mana didn't quite develop, like they wanted to, and we were able to interact pretty favorably with a low resource or low mana resource hand. Via our draw, so it just didn't end up also lining up that well. But I do think in general, Naya, the way they have it built is going to be a tougher matchup for our deck, because their deck is fairly well set up to beat up on other fair decks. It's more of a value-oriented, card quality-based mid-range deck, as opposed to a deck that has a ton of technology and more situational cards like Hand Attack, Artifact Destruction, Graveyard Disruption, which is a place I've kind of taken this deck because I think you need those tools to compete against the most serious decks in the format, like the Lands Engine decks, the Storm decks, the Time Vault Control decks, etc. I think it's tough on Naya to really compete along axes that those decks attack. So I kind of like having the diversified and the lower threat density, lower card quality, lower threat density, higher flexibility builds, kind of like this Mardu build. So anyways, quick pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily for the next game in this match, in these series of matches. Alright guys, we're back playing against Zero. This is the first time I played against Zero as well. I'm on the draw. I'm going to keep this because I love Weathered Wayfarer. I get duress here, they hit my Chrome Box, whatever. This hand's not good though. Like, I think, I don't know what they're playing, so I'm willing to keep it. I just kind of want to see what they're up to. They play an Inquisition, don't hit anything because I don't have any 3-drops or under. Drawing old Mox, it's cool. That's going to allow me to surprise them ideally with the Marchesa. I just find a draw land here, the Sunbaked Canyon. I'm kind of hoping the Mox. I'm going to find Caracas next, more than likely. I believe I find Caracas. Yeah. I like finding Caracas here because I can cast out the Marchesa on the following turn and leave up Caracas to protect it, which is kind of nice. They play out a Phyrexian Altar, so I'm thinking like Aristocrats or some crazy mill deck. I play out Marchesa to get a card engine going, smack them around for 5 here. I've got Kembal too, but I kind of want to just leave up Caracas here, and then on their EOT, if they play another land, I can just go find another land here. They do not play another land, so which makes sense. I just play out my draw land here, hit him for 5 again. I could play out Kembal, but I feel like the way that I lose this game is by exposing too many cards to a Wrath effect. They haven't been doing anything, though, so I'm kind of, like, dubious. I just go ahead and burn them out here, though. I just hit them for 6 off this Smiting Helix. They didn't really do anything in this game. I don't know what they're on right now. Like, I'm not really sure how to take their deck. A lot of basics, so it could be that they're, like, this is one of their initial builds in the format. Maybe they're just getting into it. But this is a lot of basic lands. I don't really know what they're doing at this point. But we'll go into game 2, and we'll kind of get to see more of what they're up to. Alright guys, we're back. Yeah, that hand only had like 1 land in it. This hand's fine. I mean, it's got a Wasteland, which I'm just going to, again, like I have 2 other lands in this hand. I'm just going to Wasteland them on turn 1. Again, I don't really know exactly what they're up to. I know they're running a lot of basics, but I don't know that well. So now I kind of get an idea what they're up to. I go ahead and find a Badlands here, get a look at their hand. They're on some sort of Aristocrats deck. And their mana base, to say the least, I talked to them a little bit about the mana base afterwards. They're running too many basics. Aristocrats is a tough deck as far as mana goes. Like, it's very difficult to play around Blood Moon with Aristocrats. You don't want a ton of basic lands in it. It's kind of similar to Mardu in that regard. Like, when you don't have a ton of cantrips and, like, you are a green deck, but, you don't have a huge amount of slots dedicated to mana dorks because your cards are... you just need so many cards to make it kind of work, and Mana Dorks sort of fit into that, but like not exactly. You tend to be like a Mox split deck. I believe they're on a Demonic Tutor in this deck, though, because I think I see it in the next game we play against them. But yeah, anyways, they're on a Demonic Consultation. They have Putrid Goblin, Low Retainer, Sissing Iguanosaur, Court of Calling, Blood Artist, a bunch of stuff. What I end up doing is just getting the Putrid Goblin here, because it's the hardest thing to kill in combat. Everything else like dies pretty easily to this Zealous Persecution, and they're really short on mana after I blew up their land there. I think they said this is one of their first games they played in the format too. So I mean, like, they're learning the format. Maybe not like the best way to showcase the Mardu deck, but it's one of the games I had, and like there's at least some interesting talking points, and you get to see a little bit of the Aristocrats deck. I think historically, like, this is not the easiest of matchups generally for mid-range decks. I do think Mardu maybe is a little distinctly better than decks like Jeskai. Krats just have a lot of tools to like be kind of really grindy against other mid-range decks, even though they have reduced card quality. And honestly, there's not much to say in this game. My opponent kind of kept a hand that probably was a little bit, like with greater format knowledge, is probably a little bit greedy. Just didn't have the mana support that it needed. And Wasteland is really able to kind of take over this game. Again, I have the Wasteland Savine's Reclamation thing going on. I don't have a good clock, though. Like, you'll see one of the risks or like the liabilities of this deck is that its clock is pretty bad. I attack with all here. They try to block. I just go ahead and Zealous Persecution to kind of get it out of my hand and get a little bit of incremental damage in. And I feel a little bad for my opponent. Like, we're kind of just... I wouldn't say we're stunting on them, but I mean, like, it's tough, right? Like, if you kind of get trapped on mana early in the game, it doesn't really matter that I don't have a ton of pressure on you. Like, I have enough. I'm hitting for 4 a turn, which is not insignificant, and, yeah. So I go ahead and cast Savine's Reclamation. I'm sorry, I don't. I just go ahead and activate Soulfire Grandmaster to return this next spell I'm going to cast, which is Chain Lightning. Which means after this 4 hit here, they're going to be at 2, and then unless they attack my hand, I'm just going to hit them the next turn with a Chain Lightning. Basically have Bogart and Hammer, on a stick with this Soulfire Grandmaster. I just show it to him right now as opposed to main 2 because I want to let him know, like, hey, I got this. Like, if you can deal with it, like, deal with it. But, like, you're not in a good spot. You're probably dead. You're dead to the activation off the Chandor regardless, and or any attack on the next turn from the Soulfire Grandmaster. So, kind of a tough beat. I think one of the first or second games for Zero in Canadian Highlander on MTGO. Definitely had a good time playing them. Got to have a good talk afterwards, kind of about mana and Aristocrats. If you're not familiar with Aristocrats, it's kind of a challenging mana base to build because, in general, a lot of the mid-range decks in the format, like, bias towards the color. So, like, when I say bias, like, I know you know what I mean when I say bias, but, like, if you're a green X deck, like, generally you have, like, 20 to 30% more green cards than you do the rest of the cards you're playing in your deck, even if you're 4 or 5 color. So that, like, your mana base is really heavily biased green. The reason I bring that up is because Aristocrats tends to be a deck that is very neutral bias. Like, it has, like, almost the same amount of white cards as it does black cards, as it does green cards, as it does red cards. There are a lot of different builds of the deck. You can build, like, Mardu Aristocrats. You can build Jund Aristocrats. I've seen Bug Aristocrats. You can build a lot of different varieties of it, but I think one of the most challenging things with it is the mana. That's kind of the axis that I attacked along here, as well as supporting that with, like, a lot of powerful point and 2-for-1 removal, which made it very challenging for our opponent. So as you're building your first decks, like, it definitely, if you're not like a person who builds a ton of decks. In Highlander-based formats, I would probably take a look at some of the decks that are out there first. Not to steal their ideas, like, part of the joy of the format is definitely building your own decks, but definitely look at the mana bases. You want your mana to be very good in this format, and if you're buying the cards in paper, lands are expensive, like the old lands are very expensive, but they are, if you have the money to spend on them, they are a worthy investment. One, they'll probably hold value, if not, go up in value because they're, dual lands and they're mana-based cards. So they're always going to generally be sought after, and they're going to tend to retain value. They're like both the economy of the game, and they tend to have very good economy in real life too. And they'll let you play more games of Magic. Like, it's just really tough. Like, if your mana base gets disrupted enough and you're playing a 4-color deck, like, you're just not going to play a great game of Magic. Whereas I think on, like, a very steady mana base, Aristocrats can definitely give, like, mid-range decks like Mardu or Jeskai or Esper a good run for their money because they're very grindy and they have a lot of cards that don't complement the removal suites in these decks very well. Like, I've got these Arc Trails, but, like, if I'm hitting Putrid Goblins, they're just coming back multiple times, and I'm having to deal with them over and over and over again, and eventually they'll trip me out. So, anyways, I'm going to go on a quick pause, guys. We'll be back. We have one more game against Zero here. You kind of get to see, like, the interaction between both these decks. So be back momentarily. Alrighty, guys, we're back. That hand was not good. It had no threat in it. This hand's fine. It's slow, but it's got a ton of 2-for-1 interaction. I had a Caves here. I could play out my tap land, but I'm going to try to high roll a land that will give me access to red mana next turn. They give me Revelark and Llanowar Waste. I mulligan, they did not, so I mean they're going to be a little ahead on resources this game. I don't draw into an untapped red source, so I'm not able to really cast anything, and I have to just pass the turn back. They go ahead and cast down an Impact Tremors, which is a fairly good card. I don't see it as much anymore, but it's pretty good. I just go ahead and cast out Lingering Souls. I want to start getting some damage in on them. It's not going to be a fast clock, but it'll be a clock nonetheless. I believe they play out another, Ashnod's Altar. Ashnod's Altar is not one I commonly see in Canadian Highlander anymore. I think it tends to be more of a commander card. It definitely can be it's very powerful, right? Like, if you're not familiar with Ashnod's Altar, it's sacrifice a creature, add 2 colorless mana widgets. So it's a sack outlet. It's basically a free sack outlet that makes mana. So very powerful. The problem with Aristocrats is it has very color-intensive requirements. I just go ahead and kill this Safeguard or Safe Hold Elite, because what I plan on doing is just arc trailing the other half of it next turn to keep their threats off the board. I think the more threats that are off the board, the better. It doesn't feel good to have to do that, to have to 2-for-1 myself on it, but I kind of just want to kill them here. Like, I kind of just don't want to sit around and let them, use these engine cards they have on board to win the game. And if they're kind of on, more of a... if they have cards like this in hand, I
I feel like pressuring them is just really important because if they start getting to turn their engine on, like they can easily beat us. A lot of ways to gain life in Aristocrats, and they have a lot of cards like Impact Tremors and Ashnod's Altar to kind of just like use sack outlets to unfavorably, kind of stymie our board progress. I just go ahead and shoot them with lightning here, attack them in the air for 4, and kill them. So, yeah, plan works out. They just didn't have a lot of threats. They had engine cards, but not threats. So, just some of it I think ties back to just like having, just the right mix of engine cards plus just like, good threats. Future Goblin may not look like much, but it templates very well against decks like mine because like Arc Trail is just not very, I'm not very happy to have to cast Arc Trail against it. It doesn't feel very good. You get this thing for 2 and then them for 1. So what I tried to look to do this game is play my deck in a way where I was kind of the aggressor, because I think over time their deck will tend to outvalue me if I give them enough time to set up. And I just said, hey, I'm not going to give you enough time to set up. I'm going to pressure you out. So end up pressuring them out here, and we go on to a game number 2. Right back at you guys. All right, guys, back. This will be the last game we're showcasing here. So we're playing against 0 again. That hand did not have enough mana. It had 1 land. I could have been greedy and kept it and tried to high roll a land to hit a Bob. This hand is okay. It needs black mana, but it has Fire Covenant's the card I kind of keep this hand based on. They Demonic Tutor here, which is spooky. I am going to want to hit some black mana at some point, but I also have access to a Gideon and a bunch of point removal, 2 of which exile. So they play on a Sakura Tribal. They're a Steve. I'm not going to kill this thing. Draw no Bolt. Bolt's fine. Bolt's good. But I really just want to hit black mana here. Play on their land, up to 5. They play on an Eternal Witness, getting back to Demonic Tutors. They Demonic Tutored twice. They could have just Demonic Tutored for a land, but my guess is they're probably Demonic Tutoring for engine components for their deck. I just go ahead and Helix this card because I think my mana is going to be tied up. If I draw well, I do. I draw to a land here. Find probably Badlands. Scrubland. That's a fine one to find, too. Go ahead and get the Gideon down. Gideon's going to be problematic for them because it's a fast clock. I go ahead and make a 2-2, pass it back. I think I talked Gideon earlier on. Like, Gideon's just so good. Like, this Gideon is just so good. Like, it's good in control, good in aggro, good in mid-range. Just does it all. Just really a really high-pressure card. So, I'm kind of leery here. They have 5 or 6 mana, and they don't do anything on their turn. So, like, I feel like they probably have a bunch of reactive cards. One of which is going to be Path or Plow. I just start making 2-2s. Like, I feel like if I turn this Gideon on, they're just going to Path or Plow it. And I don't have threats in hand. I just have a bunch of like random reactive kind of bad cards. Well, I mean, they're not bad cards, but they're cards that like don't win games. They just stop my opponent from winning. So I really don't want to throw my Gideon out there and just have it get Pathed or Plowed. If they want to Path or Plow my soldier tokens, that's fine. Or knight tokens. So I just start making 2-2s and say, hey, play to the board. And this is going to force them to play to the board, and then I can use my removal to some impact, other than just sitting in my hand. Yeah. That's the plan, at least. This Plains has me worried, though. So I don't end up firing up the Gideon. I really wanted to pressure them, but, I don't think it's worth it here. So they play on a Vizier, which is spooky, and a Carrion Feeder. So sack outlet with Vizier is scary. They try to play out the Murderous Redcap here. This is an infinite combo. They can just shoot me infinitely many times with the Redcap. I blow up the Carrion Feeder. So they still have the they have the combo without the sack outlet right now. So I can allow this to resolve without killing the Vizier. But what I'll end up doing once it resolves, I'll go to their EOT, and then I'll blow up both pieces of it with the Fire Covenant. I'll take 3 damage and do 2 damage to the Murderous Redcap and 1 to the Vizier, and take the combo off the board and put a -1/-1 counter on the Murderous Redcap, which will make it so that further sack outlets and or reanimations of Vizier are not going to allow it to reanimate infinitely many times. Comes back as a 1/1, puts Gideon down to 1. I just keep making 2/2s and attacking them. Like, I could have attacked this turn, but I think it's very likely they'll just block, and I'd rather get more long-term value out of putting these knights down. Make another knight. They're still leaving up this Path of this Plow, which I firmly believe they have in their hand based on how they played this game. But I feel pretty safe that I've disrupted their combo pretty well here. They play on a Safi Eric's Daughter. There's a couple cards you could be scared of here. Viscera Seer is actually one of them. So I just go ahead and get rid of this thing. If they want to have a Viscera Seer, they can. I'm going to go ahead and plow it. Plow one of these 2 at EOT. go ahead and make another. I'm going to turn this thing into a 5/5. Yeah, I'm going to turn it into a 5/5. Their white mana is all tapped, so I turn it into a 5/5. It's going to force a block on the 1/1 with a 5/5, and they're going to take 10 damage exactly, 8 on the ground, 2 in the air, and that's going to be lethal for a game-winning attack. As it comes to find out, they have one card left in their hand. I did talk to them afterwards in the Discord, and they were sitting on Swords of Plowshares. So, yeah, I kind of like the way we played this one. I think we safeguarded or protected the queen on our one good threat that we had, Gideon. For long enough to kind of buy enough time and tempo to just turn this game. That said, Zero's just getting into the format, just working on their deck. So, I mean, I've got a little bit of probably format advantage on them, and they're kind of just getting their feet under them as far as building decks in the format. So I do think as they continue to work on their Kratz deck, like it's going to become a tougher and tougher matchup for these mid-range style decks like the one I'm playing. So to kind of finish it out, I'm going to jump back into the deck. Let me go on a quick pause, guys. So jump back in the deck, and we'll kind of close some comments on the deck, and then we'll wrap this video up. All right, guys, back. So. Closing comments on Mardu. This is a perfectly suitable Tier 2 mid-range deck. I think if you want the most highly competitive mid-range variety decks, you probably want to build some sort of lands-based mid-range deck. When I say lands, I mean strip mine-based spread. This is a mock spread mid-range deck. I think there's a couple ways to go with Mardu. I think you can definitely go more aggressive, like more 1 and 2 drop aggressive threats. And less middle end. The problem that I tend to run in with Mardu aggressive decks is that I'd rather just play 4-color blood or 4-color aggro, like 4-color zoo, base Naya decks, over playing a Mardu deck. I think, when you opt to play Mardu, I think you really want to play to the color pie strengths, which is a ton of board interaction and kind of like grindy incremental advantage cards. A lot of 2-for-1 advantage cards that either impact the hand zone or the board. I'm pretty happy with where this build's at. I think there's a couple different things you could probably do with it to kind of tune it more to a meta. And there's some very interesting removal spells out there, like Malicious Affliction. You could even run Go for the Throat if you just needed more like, medium red, medium green kind of tech. But the way the deck's set up now, I think it has decent range against some of the better decks in the format. There's definitely some techier cards, like Nile Spellbomb is definitely very techy. I still like having access to it because I think graveyards are fairly important right now, and this is a deck that can definitely get overwhelmed by some of the more powerful decks that utilize the graveyard as a resource zone, to include Storm in the lands decks. It's also why we're running Kaya, Orzhov, Usurper. But realistically, like what I end up doing here is going more of like a mid-range, value-oriented route, 2-for-1 kind of grindy deck. Some of the things that you lack when you play the deck this way is you don't have a ton of great ways to pressure people out really fast, but you do have a ton of really good ways of kind of disrupting their resource base, and then riding 1 to 2 very good threats out for some long-term advantage. A lot of 2-for-1 value in the deck. I do think it's quite good. I do think it's very important to mulligan the deck effectively, because unlike the blue-based mid-range decks and the green-based mid-range decks, you're not going to have as much control over, one, your mana progression in the green decks, and then just basically card relevance in the blue decks because of your cantrips that you have in that color pie. So you really need to keep hands that are decent in the matchup. I think there's also another build of this deck where like you focus more on like kind of like taxi cards or like hate cards. This deck certainly has some, to include like, Kaya, to include Kembal. I would say that Plague Engineer is also kind of a hateful card for certain decks like Goblins or Elves. But yeah, I mean, just really an interactive kind of just all-around mid-range deck is kind of what you got here. Not doing anything unfair. A couple interesting card choices in like the form of like Savine's Reclamation. If you haven't noticed from like the last couple decks I've done, I've been running this card a lot because I'm kind of exploring it in a lot of different decks to see kind of how it interacts in the format and where I like it best. I still think the best engine deck for it is probably lands. I was talking to Jeremy White. I think he's experimenting with the card in Tin Fins, which is really cool. That's a cool concept to use it in there too on like reanimation spells. So like your Animate Deads and like your Necromancies and stuff like that, Savine's Reclamation can bring back, and then you can, bring back your Gristlebrand and draw a bazillion cards. Or you can put it in Whirlgorge or Dragon combo, like, Entomb of Savine's Reclamation after you, buried alive a bunch of stuff. And yeah, they counter your animate dead, and then you just Sabine's Reclamation it, so they have to counter 2 spells. Seems pretty good to me. Like there's a lot of different interesting stuff you can do with it, and even in a deck like this where I think it's pretty low, it's probably not at its highest upside. It's more of a median upside on Sabine's Reclamation. Getting that 2 to 3 for 1 advantage off of one card and making it very accessible via Entomb and some of our discard effects. Very powerful. I've been very happy with it in the deck, and yeah, I'm kind of glad I got to finally come back to this deck and do a deck tech on it. I'm not trying to sell it as the most competitive deck that's out there, but if Mardu's your thing, like it's good enough. Like if you play it well, you mulligan it intelligently, and you play it in the right metagames, it's going to do well. And honestly, at the end of the day, it also just plays a real good game of Magic, right? Like it's going to have some high rolly hands, the Moxen. But for the most part, like you're gonna play games of Magic, and when you play in, you win them. It's gonna feel like you made decisions that mattered in it, and for me, that kind of matters. It's kind of fun to play that way because if you play long enough, like the excitement of Magic kind of wears off. Like you just you really want to have, in my opinion, for me, like just solid interactive decision intensive Magic where what you decide to do is meaningful. And this deck allows you to do that because it's very incremental. It's very grindy. Doesn't have a ton of haymakers where it's like, oh, oops, I win. But those decks are cool too. I'm not saying anything bad against them. But if you're kind of looking for that experience in Magic and in Canadian Highlander, this is probably a solid deck for you. Definitely a very cool one. That said, if you want the best varieties of this, just play Grixis Midrange, or Grixis Vault, really. But Grixis Midrange, 4-color Blood is pretty good too. If you want a Green X variety deck that's kind of similar to Mardu, but probably better, a little more aggressive. Better mana, though. But yeah, I think the deck's very good. I think it's kind of an interesting take on it. And it's a color pie that, like I said, is kind of, hounded me for a while in terms of how I felt like it needed to be built. I still am not sure if this is like... I don't think this is the best build of Mardu, but I think it's a good one. I think it's an acceptable one and one that could win events, win tournaments, if piloted well and chosen for the right metagame. Yeah, just a solid tier 2 deck. I think it can definitely do well. Very good against creature decks. Like if you expect a lot of creature decks, a lot of aggro decks, bring this sort of thing. This deck just houses aggro decks. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Take care now, and we'll hopefully be back with more content here in the near future. Later.